trees are something that's difficult for a lot of people to draw. When you talk about nature, and a lot of people tend to think very linear, where all of their branches are even, and they're even both horizontally and vertically, and it, they don't end up looking natural like trees. So I recommend. I said in my last stream that I recommend going out and just looking at them, getting to know the trees. In fact, Bob Ross even says, talk to the trees, get to know them, and I agree with him. I think that's a good um, thing to do to really look at the trees and see how they're shaped. But we're going to do a study today and talk about a way that you can kind of fake the look of a tree, even if you don't you're not outside looking at them. So I'm going to do two different kinds of trees. And by the way, if anybody wants a reference image, because a lot of times it's easier looking at a reference image, you can either go to my Twitter, which is Sarah Goski, Goski, or you can go to, let's see, I'm trying to think where else. I think I've got one on my Facebook, which is Sarah.Goski. My Facebook is. So if you wanted to go look, I've put images out there, and so you can pull up a reference image if you want. All right, so I'm going to start with, and I've got my reference image and lesson plan up on the screen, so it's you'll see me from time to time scrolling with my mouse here, because I had to move my mouse to make room for my microphone. All right. So if everybody's ready, let's get started. First, we're going to start with an evergreen tree. We're going to do a fir tree. Today we'll be using, if you remember, I talked about the set. We're going to be using the number 2B pencil and 6B pencil, just to give you an idea of how the B and the H rating system work. The higher the number in the B's, the softer it is, and so you get more spread. So like if you were to take your spreader or your finger with a 6B pencil line, you would be able to spread it easier than a 2B. The H's means hard, and so the higher the number you get there, the harder you get. So you get crisper lines, and you can actually get, it's more shiny with the H's. The B's are more you can actually get darker colors with the B's, because it's not as shiny. It gets darker and deeper. Okay, so the HB, which I explained the other day, is the same thing as a number 2 pencil. And the number 2 is exactly in the middle. And that's so when you do things like bubble tests, that's why it's required. When you take like a bubble test, it's required the number 2, because it's hard enough where you can be crisp about it and get it exactly in the bubble, but it's soft enough that it'll be dark enough for the scanners to read. So that's why you have to use number 2 pencils in school, at least here in the States. I don't know how other countries do it, but here we do. Okay, so today we'll be using 2B and 6B. You can actually get away with using just your number 2 pencil. So if all you have is a number 2 pencil and some drawing paper, or like I said, a sheet of printer paper is fine, because this drawing is technically made to be an 8x10 today. That's fine. So again, I've got my pencils, I've got my eraser, and I've got my pencil sharpener. All right. So we're starting with the 2B pencil. Let me just... And the first thing we're going to do is draw our tree trunk. Now, the fir tree is twice as tall as it is wide. So I'm going to start with just a very narrow triangle. Okay. So that is my tree trunk. Now I look at about half, and let's see, so that's about that wide. So I'll take that, and oh, it goes off the page. So that's fun. So, so I'm going to draw my line to about half the size. So mine goes off the page because I did not put my tree trunk close enough to the middle. I was trying to leave room for my deciduous tree later. Okay, but this will work. You know, a lot of times when you're looking at composition, composition is the way your drawing is set up. It's more interesting when things go off the page anyway. And so I'm giving myself an excuse as to it's okay. It's okay that it went off the page, right? Happy accident and everything. All right, so we've got our shape. Now we're going to work with the silhouette because we are going to have, you know, shadows in this. So we're going to start doing our branches, and I'm just going to start. Some of the branches are going to come out outside of that triangle that we drew, but I'm just going to start drawing kind of squiggly. I'm starting on the right side so it looks like a greater than sign. So I'm just drawing some like squiggly lines. Don't forget to leave some holes for sky to come through. And these are, be very kind of haphazard about it. Don't try to make really straight lines. Like try to let your pencil wiggle a little as you go. Just kind of come across. Now I'm going to make some less than signs. This is what I do a lot in art is I think of what shape something looks like, and I look at the shapes in things. So instead of looking at a tree as all of these organic shapes, which it is, I'm connecting, by the way, some of my greater than and less than signs in the middle because you have to have, you're going to have some leaves that are coming towards you. But if you look at the shape of something, sometimes it's easier to visualize when you're drawing. Now, as I'm going up, this one I probably made come out a little too far, but we'll just leave that be for now. But you want them to go in and follow your line. I'm going to put a couple of holes here. So we're just going up and drawing. I don't think my tree is a happy tree today, though. You know, not like Bob Ross's trees. His trees are always happy. I guess it's a good way to be, right? So I'll do like a hole here. So I'm just drawing like little ovals for where I want my holes to be. Let's see. I might do one down here. So again, I'm not being very exact with this, just kind of following my line. And let's see, I might do some more here. We'll be covering these up with actual needles later, so it's not terribly important if it's perfect. Okay. So I'm going to bring this down a little so I don't have that weird straight line right at the bottom. Okay. So let's see, I'm going to make sure everybody can see that in the camera. Hey Molly, thanks for joining. Molly's one of my superstars. She's got pictures. She's taken some of my live classes. All right, so now we've done the silhouette. Now we're going to figure out where the light source is coming from. So in this case, I'm going to put the light source at the top right. So I'm just going to imagine that there's a sun up there, right? And so everything on that side is going to be lighter, and everything coming from underneath and to the left is going to be darker. So that's where you would use the 6B pencil. But like I said, you can make do with a 2B or with a number 2 pencil if that's what you have. So now let's work on the shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and use the 6B because I have one. But again, you can get this very similar effect. All right. So first of all, I'm going to start laying in the shadows. Now, I'm just going to use short strokes that kind of fan out on each side of the branches. So let's see. I'm going to start at the bottom actually. And I'm just using short strokes. Some of them, most of them are going to be relatively vertical. So I'm just hitting the bottom line of those branches that I drew earlier. Now fir trees have these kind of pointed areas, so I'll let some of these kind of come together. And this, even though we're doing it on the right side, it's at the bottom, so the bottom of the tree. It's going to be darker. So I'm just doing tiny little strokes. My tree is getting happier, by the way. He's starting to feel quite joyful now that he has leaves that help him get light and make sugar so he doesn't starve. This is the part where there's not a whole lot going on. You know, there are some tedious parts to drawing where, you know, you're just filling something in, and that can take a while. Or say you're doing like a really intricate design that you're drawing. It can take a little bit. Pull the paper down. Well, I didn't really draw the light source in. All I did was just kind of indicate, so I apologize if you guys didn't see that. I just kind of indicated where it is in the sky. But there you go. Okay. Like I said, the camera setup is going to be better after tomorrow, because as fast as Amazon is, the fastest I could get it was 2 days, and I ordered it yesterday, so. All right, let's see. I've got a line here. I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit, but like I said, I didn't go over my rules again like I said I was going to, but if you remember, if you were able to view my first stream, I talked about my 3 rules for my class. Number 1 rule is clean workspace. Organized also counts as clean. Number 2 rule is don't rush, and that's what I'm talking about here. So, you know, it's important to take your time. So it's okay. It's okay that it's taking us a little while. I mean, we want our tree to be happy, not feel rushed, you know. And the rest of us feel rushed probably a lot of times, so. So I'm not doing as much dark stuff on the right side, except a little underneath, just because, again, the light source is on the right. So it penetrates farther. All right. Let's see. I'm just going to, the holes that I made, I'm going to just kind of outline them. Because there would be like an underneath there. Oh, and my number 3 rule, never got to that one. But number 3 rule is actually super important because it's about self-confidence and loving your artwork. And that is no bad mouthing the art or the artist, including yourself. So, no saying, oh, mine sucks, it's terrible. That's not constructive. It doesn't help anyone. Certainly not you, the artist. So, knock it off. I mean, we all can be kind of critical about our own work. We were talking about this in stream the other night, is that, we have an idea of what we want our art to look like. And so even though other people might say, wow, it's really amazing, it's not always up to our own standards. But that's when you have to critically look at it and say, okay, what could I do differently to make this work? Almost pretend like it's somebody else's art. Don't look at it as your own. Look at it as somebody else, and you're trying to help somebody else get better, like you're the teacher or something. And that might actually help. But yeah, I mean, just saying general bad things about your artwork or yourself as an artist isn't helpful. So none of that. Let's see. I need to come across here in a couple places. I feel like I'm sticking kind of to the sides of the tree. And I taught a painting class one time. It did not even occur to me. And, I've been painting and drawing trees for years and years and years. But I went, and one of the students actually realized that we hadn't done any inner branches. All of the branches were to the right or to the left. There wasn't anything coming towards you, which is not very realistic. So try to remember that whenever I do my trees. Okay. We're getting there. Working our way up. Tree's getting happier by the moment. Now, I didn't put branches here, but I'm throwing in some extra. I want my tree to feel really full. So I'm just throwing in some extra spaces. Coming under my hole that I made there. And maybe out a little bit. There's a certain amount of serendipity to this, that you just kind of go where the pencil wants you to go. Now I'm starting to really sound like Bob Ross, because this is his kind of philosophy. It's just go with the flow, man. Just let the pencil do the work, or in his case, the paintbrush. There's some planning involved. I mean, there's an element of, like I said earlier, composition. You want it to look good. You don't want it to look you want it to look painterly in a way, which means that it looks realistic but still artistic. You don't want it to be a photo image. I mean, maybe you do. I don't want mine to be a photo image. I want it to kind of be its own thing. But you also don't want it to look like, a stick tree. Like, our human stick figures. Or just lollipop trees. That's what we used to call them in my drawing class in college. Okay, so I'm getting closer together. I've been down here. I tried to keep everything relatively far apart. Up at the top, though, I'm starting to get closer together because, everything's getting smaller. And I'm doing a little bit more on both sides. Okay. If you have any questions as we go, please let me know. So now I'm just going to kind of sitting back and looking at it and looking to see if there's some places like, okay, I down here, I think I want my branch to come down a little farther. So I'm just bringing that down, bringing the lines down. Let's see. Just just filling in some areas. Some areas I might come in and go a different direction. You know, there would be needles that would go a different direction, right? You know, not all of them are going to be coming the same way. So that's possible. Okay. One more shadow thing that we're going to do before we put the 6B pencil away is the trunk. So I'm going to just gently fill in part of the trunk and give it shape. On the other side, I'm going to actually make it quite dark. And then it goes at an angle, so it starts with just a thin line and gradually gets bigger as it gets towards the top of the tree. And then at the base of the tree, it has a little bit of darkness going around the whole thing. And that's almost everything that has some kind of lip or covering. Like if you were doing, let's say like a vase that had a, a lipped opening. If you were drawing that vase from the side, it would, at the bottom, the shadow would be small, and at the top, it would get larger and eventually go all around the lip of the base. So, okay, so that doesn't look great. I'm going to shape it a little bit more, and I'm going to blend just a little bit. So, if you have a spreader, I'm going to put a couple of lines in here, like darker lines. I don't know if you can see that. But if you have a spreader, that's this thing right here, you can take your spreader and you can just kind of smooth out. If you don't, you can use your finger. The only thing about using your finger is keep in mind that you will start getting pencil on your finger. Now, I don't think I have ever left a drawing class where I didn't have it just all over me. So, you know, I don't think that using your finger is a problem, but just keep in mind if you touch your face or anything like that, that it will be all over you. I'm also going to give myself just a little bit of ground because it looks weird that my tree is just hovering in midair. So I'm going to give myself just a little ground. We may come back and we're going to do some grasses and a little shadow in there later, but for right now, we just want to get the general ground in there. Okay, now we are going to switch back to our 2B pencil. And we're going to lay in the light side of the tree. Now, if you're using just a regular number 2 pencil, all you're going to be doing is adjusting your pressure so that you're not going as hard. Okay, so now we're going to continue using the same short strokes that fan out as the branches get smaller. And we're going to try to, again, vary the direction of the strokes so that it indicates individual branches, and you get like a more pleasing silhouette. So some of these can actually go up, right? Because this is the lighter side of it. This is the top. So I just kind of randomly started in the middle. I guess that's odd that I did that. Let's start back at the bottom. Let's be organized about this. So I'm coming in and doing, because this is light on this side, I'm coming in the middle of some of my dark branches. Short little strokes. I may come back in here later with the 6B pencil, or again, pressure with the number 2 pencil, if that's what you have. And clean up some of this so it doesn't look so straight across. But for right now, we're just laying in the basic lines. hopefully the frame rate issue has gotten better. Unfortunately, Twitch is still giving me a warning that my connection is unstable. So I will figure that out. I will get that figured out so that future streams are not so choppy. Okay. Now, I kind of want to, let's see, I put a hole here. I feel like I want an opening here too. So I'm going to just imagine that there's a branch here. That we have a little bit of an opening there. Again, this is the tedious part of drawing. This is actually the part I like the most though, because it's very meditative. You know, you can just kind of focus on what you're doing and nothing else. Just zone out a little. Oh, I missed an area down here. This area here too, I want to leave a little bit open. It's another open area. So just will be a little bit more sparse, and have my fur pieces, my needles, be further apart. I'm already liking how this is turning out though. This is good. You know, like I said, our tree is happy. Now it's important, and I'll talk about it more at the end when we do our critique, but it's important that you look at not just what you like and don't like, but what's working, you know, what's really effective, because that's how you continue to grow. It's like telling yourself what you should continue doing because it's working well. All right, I've got another hole here. It's just a more effective form of criticism, critique, feedback. The other night I made the comment that saying that I talk too much is criticism, not feedback, and that was untrue. That because criticism is more when you're judging the person as a whole. So if somebody called me a chatty Cathy, to use a very old term, that would be criticism. Someone saying that I talked a lot or I talked too much is not. That's feedback. It's giving me a constructive piece of information that I can use to, you know, do what I want with that. I'm sure the person telling me prefers that I shush. But yeah, criticism is more when you're criticizing a person as a whole, like their character. Like, you're lazy. Whereas feedback would be like, you never put your dishes away. That's feedback. You're lazy is criticism. And that it's an important distinction because a lot of times we feel like we're being criticized, and it might be more constructive than you think. There might be something in there you can use, and so it doesn't hurt as much if you realize that it's useful information rather than somebody attacking you. So at the end of the branches here, I'm having a couple little wispies where they come up. And in some of my future drawing classes, once I get my sound better, I like to make sound effects for, especially in watercolor. Watercolor probably gets the most sound effects. There's lots of whoops, whoop, whoop, whoosh, swish. But I've been doing sound effects for years, but I went back and watched some old Bob Ross episodes, and apparently he makes sound effects too, so I feel justified that sound effects actually do work. They actually make the drawing better. So, Pa, that's a good constructive note for you. Make sound effects when you make little swishes with your pencils. It helps. Okay, so there's a whole area here I'm not sure what I want to do with yet, so I'm just going to leave it and come back to it later. We're getting closer and closer. Again, I have a couple branches that are coming out. They need a little more sun than the other branches. And that's okay, Some of us need to be in the spotlight a little more than others, right? Nothing wrong with that. I think for some people, they'd rather other people be in the spotlight so it's not on them. So, it just takes all kinds to make the world go round, right? So sometimes I'm just doing little squiggle lines, or basically like a chevrons. If you don't know a chevron, it's like little connected V's, like a whole bunch of V's or W's in a row. Okay. All right, so I've got a couple blank spots in here that I did leave open to a certain extent on purpose, but it's too blank. I've got to figure out something to do. Right here, there's a whole section. Let's see. Let's take care of this first. So first I'll do some up and down strokes because that's the actual, I'm coloring it in essentially, because that's the tree trunk itself. And you will occasionally see the tree trunk, so I'm just going in some of these spots here where I see holes. I'm just going to color them in a little bit. Okay. Let's see. Then I've got to do something about this area. I think I'm just going to fill it in. I'm going to press down a little harder. Instead of getting my 6B pencil out, I'm just going to press down a little harder and I'm going to cheat a little and use my 2B to make 6B marks. And then I'm lightening my pressure to get the lighter marks above. And I'm just going to fill it out that way. Now, sometimes I do like little X's too. Needles cross each other. And that gives it a more filled in look. It also does something called hashing. And we do occasionally use hashing in this class, so I'll get to that probably on a different day. But the general idea is it's a way of crisscrossing lines so that the more you crisscross, the darker it gets, and it creates different shades of gray. Okay. Now here I want this to be a pretty dark spot, so I'm actually going to just switch to my 6B instead of this big of an area with pressure. I want this to be a pretty dark spot. It's like we're looking to the underneath part of the tree where we've got some branches. I don't know why, but I'm reminded my nephew likes to make little Minecraft obstacle courses, and some of his, he makes it so you have to go up through the inside of a tree to get to where you need to be. Pretty inventive, but this is what this reminds me of, that we're getting inside the tree and looking underneath things. All right, let's see. So I'm looking at it. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm pretty comfortable with the way everything looks. I might have a couple like little branches that come out more at the top. So all I'm doing is doing kind of like little, maybe T's with some extra lines in them. Just trying to think of what shape that looks like. T's or Y's. That just, okay. Oh, you know, I did say I wanted to come in here and create some different shapes. Let's do that first. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create an area that's very dark down here, and I'm just coloring. I'm not even doing my straight lines, I'm just coloring in down here. But then I'm going to come up and make some peaks and valleys, so to speak, where I have a thin line and then I bring it out almost like a W. Didn't touch my screen for very long, so it went away. I have my reference image on my monitor in front of me. Okay, I don't remember why I was going this way, because that was not necessary, but kind of what I'm doing is now just layering in darker, even darker than I was doing before. So now I'm putting pressure on my 6B pencil. Like I like this area, but now it looks odd around it. So now I've got to, and I'm going to make this a little bit more spread apart like we did the top of the tree. So it looks like there's individual little sprigs. Since this is the bottom of the tree, we can get pretty dark because there's not a whole lot of light reaching this area. Let's see, what else do I need? I'm going to do the whole sprig thing again down at the bottom just to really give it some character. And then I'm going to get out my spreader. If you don't have a spreader, remember you've got your finger. So I'm just bringing in a couple more dark places here, and then we are going to smooth some of this out so that it looks a little bit less choppy and a little more realistic. I am very pleased with our now pleasantly happy tree. I was going to try to come up with another word for happy, but apparently I'm having a little brain fog today, so, you know. Inject happy synonym here. Tree. I am switching to my 2B pencil just in this area because I realized that I wanted it to feather just a little more there. And in fact, I'm probably going to feather on this side too. And all feathering is the same strokes we've been making, but they kind of have like a wispy curve to them where they, like a really shallow U, like an arc maybe. Okay. At some point, you gotta say enough is enough. I'm not happy with this hole here though. I'm gonna just go ahead and bring some branches over it. It does not look like what I intended it to look like. Switching to the 6B pencil just to get some of these dark areas. You can do everything, like I said, and you can do everything with a number 2 pencil, but having a pencil set, even an inexpensive one that has like the different values, you know, the range of the 2 to, you don't need a huge range, maybe 2 to 6 or 2 to 8, so like 2, 4, 6. Like this set only has 2, 4, and 6. It doesn't have, doesn't go all the way up to, I want to say it's 10 is the highest number. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that 10 is the highest number. But I remember one of my students had a set that had a 1B, 2B, 3B, 4B, and she said, "Are we going to use all of these?" I said, "Nope, we sure won't." You do not need every pencil that exists to get an effective drawing. All right. So let's call it done so we can take a little breather and move on to our, well, I say call it done. We're calling it done for the purposes of the tree. I do want to get my spreader out, or your finger, and I'm just going to come in here and make some more strokes, but what's happening is it's blending everything together, so it's giving it a softer appearance. Now, spreaders generally have 2 sides, and all this is newsprint that's been tightly woven or tightly bound, and so you can actually peel it off and get new pieces. However, what I do, especially since if you look at my pencil set, I've got different I've got the different colored chalks, the sepia chalks, where it gives me a red brown tone. That doesn't mix well with the black, so what I do is I have a black side and a red side. So I'm making sure to constantly use this side since we're just doing the black. We're not adding any sepia today. I tried to pick a lesson that had that only used graphite, because that way if all you have is a number 2 pencil, you could do it. Now in the future that may change. I will probably spread out a little bit more, but since this was the first lesson, I'm trying to accommodate everybody. Now I'm being sort of haphazard about this. I'm very loose. I'm not trying really hard to get precise lines or anything. Making sure to blend the dark and the light together. And I'm leaving some areas somewhat unblended, and the reason why is so that, you know, you would be able to see individual needles in places. we do want to add a little grass at the bottom though. So as soon as we're done with this, I will add that before we completely call it quits on the evergreen tree. Sometimes you can use your spreader or finger to hit areas where there's maybe a little gap. Just fills in. For any of my female students out there, well, I mean, or male, you know, male can do their eyebrows too. But for anyone out there, I guess that uses eyebrow filler, that's kind of, this is doing sort of the same thing. You're just filling in those tiny little gaps so that it just looks more natural. Although I guess it could be said that if you're using eyebrow filler, it's no longer natural. Okay. I'm happy with that. I do have this one line here that nothing happened with. I'm not too worried about it. If you want, you can come in with an eraser, because it wasn't a mistake. It was just like kind of my original outline. I'm going to erase the sun too, because that was not intended to be in the sky. Always, always blow when you are using an eraser. Blow the eraser particles off. Do not wipe them with your hand. It's a habit that many people have, but what happens is that, especially like your 6B, you end up smearing it. I've done it enough times, I can tell you that you want to blow the eraser bits away. If you want to, as a highlight, you can take the corner of your eraser and come in and just kind of do like light little marks. It's another way of getting highlights and making it look more natural. I'm not going to do too much though, because I like our tree the way it is. He's having his own little private tree party here. He's so happy. All right, grass. So for the grass, we're going to do very similar strokes. I'm going to use both my 6B and 2B pencils. The 6B pencil, I'm going to do closer to the tree, because that's like our shadow. So because it's almost completely overhead, we don't have too much of a shadow. Like, it doesn't come out at an angle. I will discuss shadows in a different class when we actually have shadows on the ground. I'll talk about how you create shadows using perspective, a linear perspective. But for today, we'll just stick to just making a small shadow. Okay, so then let's see. I'll take my 6B pencil. I pulled my pressure back quite a bit, so I'm not going down as hard, but it's still going to be darker than the 2B. And I'm coming in and just doing another row of more disjointed lines. They're not all touching like the ones before. And this comes a little farther out. If you ever notice, shadows, you know, have a gradient to them. It's not, sometimes, I guess if you have really harsh light, they don't have as much of a gradient. But soft light, usually, there's a gradient. Okay, now I'm going to take my 2B pencil for the rest of it and fill in all of the areas that I didn't get. And I'm just doing straight up and down lines, and then nothing fancy. Nothing fancy here. And I'm just using that line that I drew before as kind of my marker of where to go. Now, down at the bottom, I'm going to be a little bit more spread out, and I'm bringing my pressure back even more. And since I'm with my 2B, it's going to go on there very light. down the lines. Okay. And what you end up getting is you end up getting kind of a bowl shape. You know, you're towards the outside of the line. Your lines are your strokes are much shorter. And they get a little longer towards the middle. I'm going to use my spreader again to just blend everything together. But the reason you do this is a compositional thing. Because we're not drawing an entire scene of grass, we need it to have an end somewhere that's pleasing. Otherwise, it looks choppy and unfinished. So by doing this bowl, it looks intentional. It looks, like, okay, we're just showing you some of the grass. We're giving you an idea that the grass is there, but not giving too much detail of grass. Okay. I'm coming with my eraser, and just at the very bottom, just very lightly taking out some chunks of the bottom, so it just looks a little bit more natural, organic. All right, so we are done with our evergreen tree. I would like to take just a very short break. I'm going to still talk during this break, but I would like everyone, you cannot see me right now, but I want everyone to just take a nice big stretch. Yawn if you have to. I certainly feel like it. And take a nice deep breath if you can. When you breathe in, count to 4, and breathe out, count to 4. Take a nice breath. Breathe through your nose if possible. So I'm just doing a deep breath. Then if you can, after doing a couple of breaths that breathe to 4, try upping it to 5 and see how you do. So breathe in through the nostrils. And then breathe out through the nostrils. Again, if possible, if you're stuffy because you got a little sick over the holidays, don't try to force it. You want it to be a gentle feeling because the whole point is relaxing. But it's good to take a really deep breath every now and then, just kind of collect yourself. I'm going to take a little drink of water here. I'm going to pull this down so you can see my whole tree because I think my camera got off somehow. Or maybe I should try to adjust my camera. My camera is literally being held on by duct tape, so I do not want to get too fancy with it because I'm afraid it will fall. I can't wait until I get my new one tomorrow with my cool gooseneck, and then I won't have to worry about this. But hopefully everybody can see. All right. Well, it is kind of okay. So, sorry, now it's a little lopsided, but again, I'm afraid to touch it. But here's the tree. Ta-da! Now we're going to start on our deciduous tree. We're going to do an elm. Elms are nice, big, kind of fluffy looking trees. So we're going to start with a 2B pencil. 2B is probably the pencil I use the most in my classes. So if you wanted to invest in a couple of pencils and not a whole set, a 2B is a really good one to start with. That is what I probably use the most. Let's see. I would also say maybe lead, like maybe one lead pencil, like a 2 weight. And if you go to your art store, they should know what you're talking about. A number 2 lead pencil is good because that's kind of a medium darkness. But we're going to start with 2B. So first we're going to talk about proportions. Proportions is something in drawing that is easy to get wrong. So study is really the best thing you can do. But there are some general principles to proportions, like with things like human faces or trees. So first, we're going to, the elm tree is slightly taller, whereas the fir tree was twice as tall as it was wide. The elm tree is only slightly taller than it is wide because it's a much wider tree. So we're going to start with, let's see, I'm going to start with my right trunk, the right side of my trunk. And I'm just going to very, very gently, do not press hard here because we are not going to be using this line, but we're going to be just drawing a couple general lines. Hopefully you guys can see this, okay, because it's so light. Then I'm going to draw kind of a box almost. My box is just rounded a little at the top. Like a lollipop. Look at that. We're making our lollipop tree. How about that? Makes me think of the Lollipop Guild from the Munchkins. Okay. That's actually not even as wide as I would like to make it. So it might go into our fir tree a little bit. That's okay. We'll figure that out later. For right now, it's fine that we just have a general shape. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come in and lay in our branches. So branches in deciduous trees are more visible. So I'm going to first have a branch that's going to come out. Now, when you're doing a branch from the top, you come down from the top and kind of scoop in, and then it gradually gets smaller as you go out. So see how this is scooped? And then from that, you'll have a couple branches coming out. This is a good place for sound effects, like a little shh or a whoosh, like that. Okay, on this side, now this is where a lot of beginning students will just make a branch at the exact same place on the other side. We don't want to do that. That's not how branches generally grow. So we're going to go up a little ways and scoop out a little higher up on the right side. If you look at some trees, that they'll barely branch at all on one side. So again, come from the top and scoop in. It's almost like the letter J. I don't know, today is alphabet soup, man. Everything's alphabet shaped. At least maybe that's what I'm thinking about. I mean, there's some kind of psychology there. All right, I'm going to do another branch. This one is going more towards the top. I'll have a branch coming off of it. And this is a thicker branch, so I'm going to give it 2 sides rather than just one. And then again, come from the top and scoop in. Get smaller as you go up. Let's see, this one on the right side, it is a little closer to it. Still kind of catty-cornered, so it's not exactly in the same place. Now notice this branch and this branch scoop under, whereas this branch and let's see, these two here scooped over and like in an overarch. So that just depends, especially if you're looking at trees, it depends on what it looks like. But usually that has to do with if you're going up or down or coming out towards you. Okay, so alright. And none of these have to be finished. You don't have to go all the way to the end. Like this one, I just kind of ended almost to the top of the branch. Okay, I'm going to have another branch come out here. This one's thin enough, I'm not even going to do a top line. I might do like a little tiny one. Let's see. Also, branches tend to get closer together towards the top of the tree. That's where a lot of the leaves live, up near the sun. So this guy is going to go almost, not straight up, but he's definitely much closer to the tree than the other guys are branching out more. Alright. And as I'm going to, I'm kind of darkening my trunk and defining it more. Yes, now I've got a song from The Little Mermaid in my head about where they play all day in the sun, because I talked about being in the sun earlier. So thanks, Earwig. I think that's what those are called. Alright, now the trunk is not actually going to finish like the top of a trunk. It is just going to end like that. There is no ending to a trunk. There's no top part. The branches just kind of stop at some point. You can put like a little V there that shows that, you know, it forks. You don't have to. I just did because I was showing it to you, but that doesn't need to be there. So now we have our branches. Now we're going to sketch in the basic shape of our leaves. So, using the general shape of the lollipop or popsicle, I guess, part that we did, we're just going to do some undulating lines. So undulating means it looks like waves. And it's going to come to a general point. It's a rounded point, but it's going to be pointy. And then there's some fluffiness to it. So you'll have these, like, it's kind of like drawing fluffy clouds when you were little. These like M's, these big M's. And they just kind of trail off sometimes. And it's not straight across. I'm going up a little. Like, it's almost like drawing a mountain. Not all of your peaks are going to be the same height. If they were, it'd be a really weird looking mountain. And your mind would look at that and say, there is something off about that thing. So, you know, I'm coming down farther in parts. Now mine goes off the page because, again, I did not calculate this well earlier. Miscalculation. Maybe that's the word for the day. Pull this down some. Okay. these next layers is similar, but it's going to look layered. Now here I'm going to actually come back on myself. It very much is like clouds. Big fluffy clouds. And I'm just kind of letting my pencil go where it wants to go. Here we are getting Bob Ross again. Chad is very quiet today. I guess because Philip isn't on. To keep everybody talking. Maybe once I have more people join us, it'll get more chatty. I'm not entirely sure what I did over here, but we're just going to leave that for now. Part of it because it's going off the page threw me a little. Okay. Now at the top, you just want to follow the general shape, but again, it does not have to be exact. You can come down and have these little peaks and valleys. Let's see. I think that's pretty good for now. So let me bring this down so everybody can see. I feel like my camera is moving farther and farther. It must be falling. All right, so now you can see the whole tree. Now we're going to work on what's called contours. Your contour is your outline. There's actually different types of contour drawing where you, for example, there's something called blind contour. And what that means is that you look at the tree, you do not look at your paper, you look at the tree and you take your pencil and draw the outline of the tree. Usually you need to go pretty slow, but you just follow it with your eyes and draw what you see. With blind contour, you're going to end up getting very funky looking shapes because it's kind of like closing your eyes and drawing something. It's not going to look like what you thought it looked like in your head. Modified contour is what a lot of artists use. I use it quite often, and that's where you look at the tree and you start drawing an area, following with your eyes, and then you do just a quick glance at your paper just to make sure you're in the right place, and then look at the tree again, glance at the paper, and you just keep doing that back and forth. That's called modified contour. That is probably one of the more popular ways of drawing nature shapes, or really anything. I mean, I guess if you were doing working with a model or something like that, it would be kind of the same. So modified contour. Anyway, so we're working with our contours, our outline. We're going to use our 2B pencil, and since we already have the contours of the crown of the leaves, now we're going to create a silhouette. We're going to vary our direction of the strokes to indicate individual leaves. So starting, I'm just going to start on the left corner. Just kind of, you're doing similar to what you did with the fir tree, but your strokes aren't going to be as choppy. What you're doing is kind of, you're drawing a line, but it's a very squiggly line, and you're going back on it at times, which is going to create these lines that come down or come out. You can make it thicker where you need to. Again, this is really our contour, not our shadow yet. You don't have to press terribly hard here. Now I'm coming up, even though my line that I made earlier comes down here, I'm going to actually come up as if it started up here. So now I'm starting to let my pencil go where it wants to go again, rather than strictly following the lines. And you can do jagged lines like, what would those be like? Like heartbeat lines, sort of. Like what you would see on a heart monitor. If you were spazzing out, I guess. Maybe you don't want your heart monitor to look like this. That would probably mean you seek emergency medical care immediately. Although if you have a heart monitor at home, I don't know. I would imagine you have your doctor on speed dial. So at times I'm coming down and like I'm scooping down with my squiggle lines to indicate that there's like branches that are coming out and down from the tree. I hope that made sense. It did not sound right coming out of my mouth, but I'm hoping you'll ask questions in the chat if it did not make sense. So again, we're kind of on the tedious part. If you were doing blind or modified contour, this would be even more so because, and it just takes a lot of practice of doing it. But you're having to go slow because your eyes are following the outline. All right. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. I'm going to do some horizontal lines too. You know, I feel like my leaves are just growing everywhere. Everywhere. All right, so I'm coming back to my left side. And it looks like someone just joined us. Just so you know, I've been having some audio and video problems, so that's why you can't see my face right now. But I'm getting a new webcam tomorrow, and hopefully that will solve some of my issues. But welcome. Right now we're working on our deciduous tree, and we're just making little strokes, little squiggly lines that indicate the contour, the outline of our tree areas. Okay. So just got some dropping down here. All right. Let's see. Make that a little bigger. Okay, I'm going to come in for the other side, get the contour going. I'm doing a few horizontal lines, but I'm going to try to get, just because I'm at the edge of the paper, I'm going to try to get back to my vertical lines. There we go. I'm just kind of go out and in. Here's where I did something funky. I don't know what I did, so we're going to try to make up for that where we can. There is nothing like trying to draw at the edge of your paper and your pencil's going off the side. Not fun. And I did talk about proportions earlier, and remember I said that proportions were difficult for beginner artists. Well, look, I've been an artist for, I mean, producing work, at least in an academic sense, like college and stuff, for 25, 30 years now. So, I've had a lot of practice and I still got my proportions wrong. So there you go. I like to make things big though. If you go and look at some of my artwork on my website, it's goskydesign.com. A lot of those pieces are, 4 feet by 6 feet, or I have one wall hanging that's, let's see, it's 108 inches. What is that? 9 feet? 9 feet by, I think, 6. Oh no, it's double that, so I don't know. It's 108 by 100 inches. How about that? So 9 feet by 9.5, or 8.5. It's big. I like to work big. We're getting there. Wonder if anybody else feels that their tree is getting happier as it takes shape. I definitely can see what Bob Ross means by the happy trees, because it gives it life. It starts as just sticks and lines, and when you start adding these interesting bits to it, the outlines and the shadows and the highlights, and it does start to seem happier in a way. Maybe he had something there. I thought about hosting his channel when I'm not doing anything, because he does marathons. Now his stuff is oil, which I don't do anything with oil as of yet. I mean, I do oil paintings, but I don't teach it. So I thought maybe it would be cool to stream that, because as far as I can tell, he's the only other person teaching traditional art on here. Okay, so here I'm at a point where I want to come in a little. I want to not stick to that outline of the tree. So I'm just telling you what I was doing, so you're not like, Sarah, why are you going so off from your lines? Or maybe you weren't thinking that, but just in case. I also understand now why Bob Ross tells so many stories, because it's very awkward just standing in silence drawing. Usually if I'm drawing on my own, I'm listening to music or something like that. And I've got a pretty interesting playlist that I would love to share with you guys, but there are a lot of licensing issues, so I have to look into that. I think I might be able to do Amazon Music, and I think there's a loophole there with Amazon Music, but I have to figure that out. So almost there. Now mine goes behind my fir tree, so I'm just going to pretend that there's lines there. Okay. Yeah, it's all right. That is a bit of all right. Just bring some more down here. We're going to be filling this in though. So we don't need to do too much. So what I'm going to do is now we're going to do our crown shape. And the crown is still the outline, but it's like that, man, I really am having issues with words. It's the crown. But it's this dome area, like that kind of goes around all of the different leaves. So we're going to do that with the 2B pencil. I think the 6B we're pretty much only going to use for shadow in this one. So we're going to lay everything out first. Now we're going to use the same short little strokes, but we're going to darken our trunk and branches as we go. This will help like sky hole placement so that when we see through the tree. All right. So this time I'm going to start at the top, and I don't know if you guys have this, but I'm starting to get pencil on the underside of my hand. So occasionally you may need to just wipe that or go wash that. I'm not going to worry about it right now because we're just doing a study. But when you're doing something, say you were doing a portrait, or this is one of those clean as you go kind of situations. All right. So let's start. So I'm just going to start at the top because I feel like the top always I get to that last. So I'm doing my short little strokes. This is very similar to the fur. Maybe they're a little shorter, but and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work in like little circular areas. So basically rounded areas, I guess is the best way to put it. So see how I have like a little round shape here. So now I'll move on and I'll do a little round shape here. Because deciduous trees are definitely less angular. They're more rounded. You have really rounded trees like weeping willows and things like that very soft. So just again, see I've got a little round shape here. So I'm working little round shapes. That might come off a little bit, come out and get some individual leaves. So I appreciate all of you guys coming out. I know that it's the middle of the day, so a lot of people work and it's difficult. Or for some of you, I guess it might not be the middle of the day, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I appreciate you making time to be here with me and take my class. Okay, so I've been kind of neglecting the middle areas here, so I'm going to leave some areas light, and I am following that shape that I made earlier, those fluffy cloud shapes. I am following those, and those will be my internal round shapes. And see, it helps because we made them rounded to begin with. And don't forget that you want to go different directions at times. Makes it look more aesthetically pleasing, natural, organic, all of those fun things. Now, remember, we drew our light source over here. Now, even though I erased the light source, it's still there. So in this tree, since it's to the left, the light source is, then our dark is going to be to the right. So I'm also going to do more leaves on the right because when it's light, you tend to see through the tree more on that side. We're back on the tedious part. actually going to, I know I mentioned in my last stream that I don't use erasers for erasing mistakes very much, but I realized I kind of wanted a hole there, so that's what's happening. In fact, I really haven't been paying too much attention to the holes, so I need to start really focusing on that and figuring out where I want those to be. So I might put one here. So see right here, I just created like this little peek through. Let's see. I'm going to do one here so you can see the branch there. And wherever you can see your branches, you want to darken those. Darken the branch in that area because it will make it stand out more. Now you'll notice that as you use your pencil, it's going to dull a little bit. I actually like that. I feel like it gives me a little bit more control than when it's sharp. When it's sharp, it's nice because you get really crisp lines, but it's hard to get serendipity with a sharp pencil because it draws exactly where you draw it. It doesn't go anywhere else. Whereas with the more dulled down it is, you get you just don't know what's going to happen, and I like that. Sorry, my computer's talking to me. I wanted to look up and see what it had to say. It was not important, but you never know when your computer starts talking. You should probably listen. So I'm going to do another hole here. I like these branches over here. So I darken the branch right in that area. So this is probably going to take us the longest amount of time. So I'm going to start. I know I said don't rush, but I am going to speed up just a little because, you know, I want you to have a finished drawing, and we're already an hour and 40 minutes into the stream. So I promised you 2-hour streams, or at least that the class part of it would be 2 hours. So I really want to try to stick to that when possible. And we did have some technical issues earlier. As far as I know, we're still having them, but that did cause a slight delay. Eventually I will get that stuff ironed out, and so when you join me, you will not see nearly as much. We'll be able to start in the lesson right away and not have to deal with some of the sound and video issues that I've had. We will get it right, folks. We'll get it right someday. So I'm still working in my little rounded areas, and then I connect my rounded areas, sometimes leaving holes, sometimes filling in. Now, something we had talked about in the last stream was a way for us to critique each other's work, a way for us to upload. I have not had a chance to look at Discord yet and figure out how to do that. When I do, though, that is a very exciting venture for me, because ultimately that would be great if we could actually have live classes on stream just like it would be in person, except we're online, where we can share our artwork with each other. That would be an ideal for me. So I'm going to look into that. I think there's a way on my website that I can allow comments. I don't know if pictures are able to be uploaded though, and that's what I have to check on. So here I'm going to go a little bit lighter because this is on the light side of our tree. So I'm just not filling in nearly as much. And in fact, I'll probably come with my eraser back in here as a technique and just pull out some of this, make it lighter. I'll show you how to do that. But I don't want this area to be too dark because it is right at our light source. I mean, we'll be adding shadow with the 6B pencil. We're getting there though. Halfway done, approximately. I will tell you that for future drawings, it's not usually this tedious. I picked this for the first day just because I think trees are interesting, and I wanted to pick something that you could use the same, like a number 2 pencil with, if you didn't have a pencil set. However, most of my drawing classes are a little like my painting classes, where it moves relatively quickly from one section to the next. You're not working on one section for very long. So this tedious part of coloring in the trees, so to speak, is not a common thing. This is a little dull. It is part of art though. I mean, art can get dull at times. Like I said, I tend to look at it more as meditative. But of course in stream, it's not the same. Okay. Let's see. I want to leave some areas, so I'm going to darken this here and darken my branch there. Okay. Now, right now what I'm doing is I'm looking at kind of the negative shape, like this, the opening shape, rather than the tree, the leaves themselves. So I'm going to bring some leaves down into it as if it were the bottom of my tree. But I'm going to work this one, I'm going to do kind of like an eye shape, like that elliptical. So hopefully everybody's still awake and still drawing. I knew some of you are working on your own thing and not necessarily the trees, but hopefully you're getting interesting information from this. Sometimes I do, with deciduous trees, you can do like little, they're basically leaf shapes, but you can do little circular, little tiny circles. It's almost if you were drawing just swirls, but very tiny. And we still have to do the shadows. So I said I was going to speed it up, and then I got meditative again. Okay, I've got a question. How are your art classes structured? Could each of your lessons culminate into a bigger picture we can piece together? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Uh, like, do you mean if I could do one tree and that be the end of the stream? And we just do several trees over time? Or I'm not sure I get what you mean by piecing them together. Remember, you're still darkening your branches where you can. I can tell you the general structure of my class is most of them will be about 2 hours, and you should have a completed painting or drawing rather, in this case, by the end. Now, because we're just doing a study today, it's not a landscape. We're just doing 2 different trees, and I'm teaching you about drawing trees specifically. But generally, we would actually have a finished drawing where it'd be a tree and a sunset and a background and some foreground. Like, you'd have a lot of stuff going on normally. Like I said, today was just a study. Let's see. You said, no, I mean, will the lessons be learning to draw specific things that can become a larger picture? A tree, a sunset, a house. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So, no. Today we're just doing a study of trees. I explained this in my intro stream, but basically drawing is going to be more where I do technique stuff, where I talk more about technique. So we will actually draw pictures, so don't worry, it's not going to be all just drawing a couple of trees and no other features. But there will be more studies. There will be more studies where we're just drawing a face, or we're just drawing trees, or we're just drawing buildings. Not all the time, but drawing is just where I focus more on technique. Painting will be a completed painting every single time. I do not have any paintings where it's just a sample of something. Okay, let's see. I think I'm going to leave an opening here. Oh, that was my opening. I cut into my eye, guys. I wasn't paying attention what I was doing. See, I was rushing a little. That's what happens when you rush. That's why it's my number 2 rule. Don't rush. So that's okay. We'll make it work. Happy accidents and whatnot. That's a good question though, because since we were doing just the trees today, it does seem like, oh, well, maybe we draw just the tree and then eventually you learn how to draw the other components to a picture. But no, generally all of the components of a picture are taught at the same time. Today was just the study of a tree, because as you can see, trees take a very long time to draw. Now, if we were drawing a tree as part of a drawing, we probably wouldn't put nearly this much detail. And in painting, you don't have to put this much detail. You can kind of fudge it in painting. You can fake detail in different ways. And you'll see Bob Ross does that a lot, where, you know, he puts an overlay of a dark color. and then he puts a little bit here and there of a lighter color, and then he takes his highlight color and just goes, and done. It looks like this amazing tree, and he did hardly anything. So there in painting, it's a lot easier. We probably won't be drawing that many trees because, as you can see, it is very time consuming. Most of my landscapes don't have trees, or if they do, it's just like the trunk of the tree and a branch or something like that. So I'm going to color this in here. Now, here I'm going to add like a split. I'm going to make it look like this is two different branches rather than one single one. We'll be adding in shadows later that will make that look a little more realistic. You're welcome. Thanks for the question. And that's good feedback for me too, to maybe explain that a little better when I do studies at the beginning, that for people that are just joining maybe wouldn't know how I structure. I encourage everyone to go back and watch. I made a highlight that cuts out some of the messiness of the it's the entire stream pretty much. It's the entire instruction part, but it cuts out some of the parts where I clearly had too much wine by that point. It was New Year's Eve. Come on, guys. I didn't get too carried away, but it happens. But I have a highlight, and the highlight I would recommend watching that. It's probably about an hour and a half long, but it explains all the tools, but it talks about the structure of my class as well. And if you like chai, or even if you don't like chai, I give my chai recipe at the very end. And let me tell you, if you like chai, I think it will be a pleasant surprise. If you don't like chai, try it anyway, because you might be very surprised. It is delicious. I mean, even if you don't like regular tea, it's not tea tasting too much. I talked about it in that stream, but it tastes more like a hot cocoa, like a tea version of hot cocoa. It's pretty good. Not good for you, but tasty nonetheless. I guess it's better for you than hot cocoa. I don't know. Maybe. All right. Guys, we're almost done. It's happening. It's happening. We're almost at our 2-hour mark, so we still have to add in our grass and our shadows. So I'm working. Hopefully you are too. Maybe you're already done. Maybe you're faster than me because I'm talking, and it's distracting me a little. I didn't leave as many gaps as I would have liked to have left, but I still left quite a few. There's quite a few gaps in there, so that's happy. Sometimes, in fact, I wouldn't even say sometimes. I would say a lot of the times, what you intended in your head turns out different than what actually shows up on your paper. And I think that's okay. I think that's kind of part of the process, is letting the universe do a little bit too, and not having to feel so in control. I think it's kind of the fun part of art. for me anyway. Maybe that's something, Pa, if you're still on here. I know we talked the other day about you know, being disappointed sometimes in your own work because it wasn't quite the vision that you had. And maybe there is an element of control there. Like if you could let go and say, okay, well, it happened the way it happened. And, you know, like I suggested in the last stream, do something different with it. Or, by the way, I did go out and check my website, and the drawing I was talking about where I did the slashing, it is out there if you want to check that out, goskydesign.com. But, you know, ultimately, whatever actual control we have in this life, it's mostly in our heads. I think control is mostly an illusion. So art just makes that more obvious sometimes. All right. So finishing up, I'm just going to, I am rushing. I know I'm going against my own rules, but I want to get this done. So I'm just coming in here. This side of the tree is just going to look rushed. And I'm going to be okay with that because I said so. So, but colored in. All right, now wherever I see my branches, I'm going to come in and darken my branches. There's a nice big chunk here. We're not worrying too much about shadow just yet, but just do a medium pressure. So then that way when you, if you are using the same pencil and you go to do your shadows, you still have somewhere to go. You can still go darker than where you are because you don't want to go too dark right now and then your shadows and highlights look exactly the same. The video is a bit lagging. Don't know if you're the only one having the problem. You're not. I will, let's see. Oh, yes, I can put these on YouTube, and I generally have been having problems with, thanks for letting me know my audio is doing okay. But I am having problems with network and camera and all kinds of things today. So today might not be an exemplary lesson of what my future streams will be like because I'm working on getting those things fixed. But yes, I'm going to be uploading these to YouTube. Also, I'm making highlights of the actual class part of it, not like the beginning or, you know, where we chat or anything like that, and adding those to my Twitch. So there will be, I'm going to put these in multiple places. And I may even start trying to post them on my website, which is goskydesign.com. I know I mentioned that a bunch of times, but I just want to make sure everyone knows. And right now, just, I'm sure you guys figured this out, but I'm coloring in the rest of my trunk down at the bottom. Again, using medium pressure. But yes, I will post these in multiple places because I really want art to be accessible to everyone. Great question. Thank you. And again, sorry for the lag. We will get that fixed. Or quality isn't my middle name. Quality's not my middle name, but it should be because I like it. Okay. I'm calling this section done. We're going to move on to shadows. So I'm picking up my 6B pencil. If you are using a number 2 or you only have one pencil, then now you will be using your harder pressure. You're welcome. Good question. So I've got my 6B pencil, which like I said at the beginning is darker. So we are going to sketch our shadow in the side of the crown. So we're going to come on this side because remember our light source originally was up in this area. Okay, so you have this problem that you don't like your own drawings very much most of the time. It got better as my skills got better, but initially it was difficult to make myself even draw at all. Well, you know what? It's a good point. It's very discouraging when you feel like everything you do is just not turning out the way you want it to turn out. And I'm glad you made yourself continue. You have this problem. What helped you a lot? Instead of approaching it as making a good drawing, practicing drawing, eventually I'll get good. Very good. I like that. See, that's positive. You took something that you weren't feeling so great about and you put a positive spin on it. I like that. I'm glad you continued because you will just continue to get better the more you practice. You get better and better. It's almost impossible not to get better. So what I'm doing right now is coming in some areas. I'm not coloring everywhere, but I'm coloring. Makes it sound like I'm doing like adult coloring or something. But I'm just generally adding still kind of round shapes, but now I'm just filling in part of the area with this darker color. Again, if you are using the same pencil, use pressure. What allowed you to sit down day after day? Yeah. And you're right. I mean, if anything you're a beginner at, if you're really good right away, then, you're a prodigy. And as we all know, prodigies are kind of few and far between. That's not normal. The norm is people suck when they start something. I suck when I start things. That's just the way it is. And I used to be that way too when I was little, especially. I don't know if my sister is on here, but when I was little, I was such a perfectionist and I had to be good at something right away or I would just quit. And there were a couple of things where it wasn't like I was good right away, but I was at least decent right away. It wasn't completely terrible. So it was enough things that I said, oh, well, I can just do the things I'm good at or decent at. But I've learned as an adult, that doesn't cut it because I want to do many, many more things than just the things that I'm decent at right away. But you'll find the more you do skills like drawing, if you're at all interested in music, and you never know, one day on here I might start teaching live piano lessons. Because that was my very first job, I was a piano teacher. But these are good basic skills to have, and they help you with skills in other places. Like I know some of the people have come to my stream from John's stream, so some of you may be programmers. And I will tell you, I don't program on a regular basis, but I can, and I have in the past for different projects done my own programming, and this just really helps you think outside the box. I mean, when you can draw and you can think creatively and you can let serendipity happen, because I feel like in programming it can be very easy, it's communication, so it can be very easy to get caught up in the structure of it. But there's a certain amount of serendipity that happens too. All right, I'm trying not to draw everywhere here. I'm getting a little carried away. I'm talking too much, guys. So I'm going to have to probably focus on what I'm doing. So I'm taking my round shapes. Basically what I was saying about the programming, though, is that it's good to have a creative outlet, no matter what your job is. That's really good. You said that you're starting to let your relatives and friends see your work. That's a good start. Okay, down at the bottom here, I'm just going to do kind of like these general squiggles. But I mean, that's a good place to start. And in fact, they say, like with public speaking, they say first, say your speech to yourself. Then say your speech to your dog. Because your dog will not judge you. They will look at you with loving eyes and say, that was wonderful, because they want a treat. And then you and then you do your speech for your family. And then you do your speech for your friends. Then you do your speech for a small local group of something, some kind. Maybe you do your speech for like your local Toastmasters chapter. And eventually you can do your speech for thousands of people because you know it so well, and that, and it's become so practiced that you're natural at it, and it doesn't affect you nearly as much as if you went and tried to give a speech for thousands of people right off the bat. So it's a good idea to start small. Just show your friends and family and see what they think. Get their feedback. Especially if you have friends that are artists. I feel like they're going to give you the most honest feedback and be less judgy about it, because your friends and family, unless they are artists, are probably going to give you an ooh-ah. They're going to say, oh, wow, that's really great. I wish I could draw like that. But as we discussed the other day, that's not exactly helpful. It doesn't help you grow as an artist. I mean, it's nice to hear to a certain extent, but if you know that there are things you would like to work on, you'd much rather have constructive feedback, from someone who's knowledgeable, who knows art. So if you have any friends that are artists, or if there's a local artist in your area that seems pretty open to hanging out, I would definitely take your work and show it to them as well, because they'll help you grow, and they'll do it in a non-judgmental way. They'll do it where it's helpful, because they had to go through that too. The artist community is generally pretty supportive. I did not. That would be cool if I ever got to work with him, but I doubt that. I did not. I came to him because of The Witness. It's my favorite game, and when I realized that it wasn't just some giant conglomerate gaming company that made it, and that it was actually a single person's idea, then I became enthralled, and I was like, I got to figure out what this guy does. And when I figured out that he streamed, I just started following him. Have ever since. So he's a pretty cool dude, or at least he seems that way. I guess you can only tell so much about a person from a stream, huh? I'm looking over at my camera like you guys can see me, but I don't have that camera on, so it's not helpful. I guess it's good practice, right? For when I do get a working camera. All right, I'm kind of jumping all over the place here. Out of curiosity, Flying High, are you a programmer? Or UX, or some part of game development? All right, let's see where I want some more shadows. So again, remember the light side, like in our fir tree, the light side has less shadow areas. They still have shadow areas nonetheless, but less. And I'm not being as precise about this because I've made a decision. Like earlier with our fir tree, I'm going to be using my spreader, or if you don't have a spreader, you can use your finger. So it's going to clean some of this up to where I don't have to be as precise. So because I've made that decision, now I don't have to be as exact. I can kind of put my shadows where I want. Oh, Well, thank you, sister. I'm taking it that's my sister and not my nephew. My nephew's 10, so I don't feel like he would say something that positive. I mean, not that he's not a nice and positive person, but that was a very encouraging thing to say. So thank you, sister. In our family, everything is kind of a family affair. We do a lot together. We work together very well, and most of the time. So my sister is brilliant. She is the idea person in the family. She's the one that comes up with all the amazing ideas that usually she just gets me to produce because I like the production. Like I said, this part, the part of the tree that we're doing right now is very tedious, but I like it. I like the tedium. So I think maybe not, she does not as much, so she just gets me to do it, which is fine. Makes us a good team, right? Software developer, not in game dev. Maybe someday. Yeah, that would be cool. I said in my last stream that game dev is like that and rocket science are like the only two things I haven't gone into in medicine. I've dabbled in so many different things in my life, but I kind of would like to make a game. I have some ideas for a game that I would like to make that also has to do with mindfulness. That's what The Witness was kind of about. Uh, but mine, I think, I don't know. I don't want to say too much because if I actually do something with it, then, I don't want somebody else to take my idea. It's probably not that great anyway, but you never know. I mean, I've seen some really dumb games out there do very, very well. So, you know, if mine's even not half bad, it might do okay. I just have to figure out how to do it. And I would say like a programmer at heart in that I like doing things the long way because it's the correct way. So, for example, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Excel, but you can do really intricate formulas in Excel. And I used to teach classes, and all of the students that worked with me and not with other trainers, I made them write their Excel formulas out rather than using the wizard. And I definitely got some groans and grumbles at the beginning, when I first started having everybody do that. But let me tell you, the people that left when, I was a trainer at the time, the people that left my training were excellent at Excel formulas, and they could really create more. Rather than just doing basic formulas like a sum if or a VLOOKUP, they could actually create something from scratch and get it to do more complicated stuff. And some of those people were the ones that I ended up teaching a little bit of programming and teaching them how to write their own macros and stuff like in Excel. So, it really, to me, it's a benefit to do something from scratch and not use a program. It's not like there's anything, I don't know. I do not know this stuff well enough to know if there's an issue with tools like Unity and stuff where you're not really doing very much. Everything's on the, from what I can tell, everything's from the interface side, the user interface. So I don't know. Maybe for some people they need a GUI to help them visualize. And don't get me wrong, I am 100% about the graphic interface, but like I said, I like to do things from a ground up. I think this is pretty good on the shadow. I don't know. What do you guys think? I feel like I said, we don't need to be as exact because we're going to be spreading here shortly. But so, therefore, I feel like if I wanted to get into game dev, I'd really have to learn programming first. And that's another reason why I've been watching John stream his J programming, because I'm getting to see kind of the inner workings, and especially lately now that he's doing like the compiler stuff and explaining how everything works. that's what I need, you know, to really learn and you know, if I want to do game dev, I'm going to do it that way. All right, so now on the bottom of my trunk, I'm taking my 6B pencil again. I'm coming in the bottom of my trunk and just putting shadow down there. There's a little bit more. There's going to be more on this side because this is our away from the light side, because our light is up here. And I didn't draw the light source, but we just know it's there. That happens a lot. Okay, now I'm going to bring this out a little. The base, our roots are spreading out. Okay, we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the shadow of the fir tree, but we're going to rein it in a little bit more. We're not going to go as wide because we have more light area because the tree doesn't start until higher up. So there's not as much shadow. So I'm going to switch back to my 2B pencil. Every time I say 2B, I want to do the terrible Hamlet joke, to be or not to be. But it is the question, isn't it? It's not a terrible joke, it's just overdone, right? I mean, everybody says that. And actually, for you guys that came from John's stream, my doing this stream actually came from someone in that stream. One of the chatters mentioned something. I mean, this was a long time ago. It was over a month ago. Mentioned something about how cool it would be to have an art class online on streaming where you could, you know, get feedback immediately from the teacher. And I thought, you know what? That's a pretty brilliant idea. And because I am currently in school, I'm a grad student in instructional technology at East Carolina University. And what instructional technology is it's the study of teaching. So rather than just being a teacher, I would also design the actual instruction or study the most effective ways of teaching. So what I'm studying right now, my focus is online education, specifically live streaming. I think that this is a key to kind of the future of online education. I think, the younger generation, like my nephew's age, which is around 10, that era, they like to watch videos and they like to stream, and they would much rather do that than sit live in a class, in a face-to-face class. And in fact, my nephew is in virtual school, so he doesn't even go to a physical school. He goes to school online. And as far as I know, he's doing really well and he likes it. So I think that it's a gaming generation, right? And a YouTube generation. And I think that if we, as educators, want to stay abreast of quality education, to me, streaming is where it's at. So that's why I'm doing this, because if you can stream art lessons and it can be effective, you can stream anything. Because art is one of those things that you feel like you have to be face-to-face because it's such a physical thing, traditional art classes. So I am out to prove right now that it's possible and that it can be done. So you guys are part of my experiment. All right, so we've got our grass. Now we're gonna spread. And remember how I said earlier, you have a black side, and because I might be using sepia tones later, I'm gonna keep this other side clean for red. So I'm gonna start with the grass, and I'm just doing, it's basically like coloring, because all I'm doing is blending everything together. Now, when I blend, I always start with my dark first, and blend out towards my light. So I start with the dark side and then blend out. Start with the dark side. It sounds like something from Star Wars. Does anybody start with the dark side and go good? I don't know. I feel like once the dark side takes hold, that's about it. I don't know if there's any other Star Wars fans out there. I have not seen the newest movie. I will be seeing that very soon, hopefully. Okay, so I have done the branches because I've just been going in and doing just the branches. That's first. Now I'm going to go do the tree. So starting with the dark, blending to the light. Now I'm trying not to touch too much of my outside tips because I want to leave some of the serendipity, like, you know, the little tiny leaves. If you're going to do them, try to individually do them rather than part of your back and forth stroke. But already this is looking a million times better just by spreading. Again, you can use your finger. You just have to clean. You just have to wash your hands because it will get on everything. And I actually found that these kind of pencils are not easy to get out of clothes. It will come out, but you do have to use like a stain remover or something. Okay. I really apologize again. I know I keep saying it, and I feel like at some point I should apologize for apologizing. But I know how I feel when, you know, I'm streaming, I'm watching someone else's stream and it lags even a little bit. I'm like, you know. So I know how laggy this has been the entire time. And I'm just really hurting for you guys. So I appreciate you being patient and sticking with me for today's lesson. Like I said, I'm going to work on improving it for the next lesson, which incidentally, since we're just kind of filling in right now, I'll go ahead and tell you guys I'm going to stream on Sunday, this coming Sunday. I want you guys to just look at the difference here. Look, the difference here and like over here. Like how smooth this looks and how much more organic. So spreaders are your best friend, man. Or your finger. Your finger is your best friend too, I guess. By the way, if you're ever interested, the finger that you can control the pressure with the most is your middle finger. Girls learn this sometimes with makeup because we have to, or boys. I keep saying girls like only girls wear makeup, and that's just not true. So I apologize, guys, for leaving you out. But people who wear makeup, how about that? Generally know that your middle finger, you have the most control over the pressure. So if you ever are using your finger as your spreader, that's good to know. That's very handy. So flying high, if you're still on here, the software development that you do your own software development or do you work for a company? Like, could you ever live stream some of your work or is it proprietary? Because that would be very interesting to watch because that's a little bit closer to the kind of programming I'm familiar with. Programming for games is just very different than what I'm used to. Now remember, I did say we were going to use our eraser on the left side, and I still intend to hold that promise. So let's see if I can speed up the coloring here. I really do feel like I'm coloring. Okay. Well, now, you know, earlier I mentioned that I felt like I didn't leave enough holes, but now that I have filled in some of this, I actually think it looks pretty good. I actually like it. See, this is why you can't judge your drawings as you go, because when you're in the middle stages, this is the same with painting. When you're in the middle stages, it's not going to look like what the end result is, especially in my classes, because I work step by step. Like with my paintings, you know, your first layer is just getting a ground down. You know, it's just getting something down that gives us a basis of where to go. So it's not going to look like anything yet, but you add a layer, and then you add another layer, then you add another layer. You can see this really well with Bob Ross. When he starts out, it's just a bunch of blobs on a canvas. And then magically, as he starts drawing happy trees and happy clouds and happy everything, it turns into this amazing picture. So I always love that magical part of art. So you do have to wait till the end. And something that's really important, I will do my critique today, but something that's really important is for you to get up and walk away. Especially if you're being critical of your work. Because if you get up and walk away, sometimes you get a fresh perspective when you come back. And perspective is important. You know, we tend to get trapped in one mindset. All right. I'm pretty happy. I'm going to leave that there. Now, I have a kneaded eraser. If you have a regular eraser, that can work too. I'm going to use the kneaded eraser because I'm going to make it into a point. And I'm just going to start kind of using that point almost like a pencil. And I'm coming in and I'm just doing little dappled marks on the left side of my tree because this is where my light is. So I'm going to have little patches of light. And with kneaded erasers, you have to reshape it every once in a while. I'm going to have patches of light that make everything lighter. So I'm not doing it everywhere. I'm going to leave my shadow areas alone, but just kind of on the top of the branches there. Oh, it is lagging again. Okay. Man, this is great. And I really was thinking towards the beginning, like, oh, I'm not liking how this is going. I always think that when I teach these classes. I think, please let this turn out well so that my students don't think I'm totally awful. But see, then I'm not taking the advice that I'm giving you guys, which is to, you know, give yourself a break and just see what happens. Just let it go where it goes. I'm coming back in with my spreader and just doing some more lines because it does have a little bit of the pencil on there, but not much. Okay, so I'm going to put that away. So we're done here. Let's see. Okay, let's see what chat says. Small software house. Yeah, I figured probably most people aren't in the position that John is where he can you know, he's working on his own thing, so he can stream. But yeah, I actually have not heard of that language. It seems sort of familiar, maybe, but I don't know it, so. Well, that's cool, though, that you work with a small group. I mean, I would think that would be rewarding to work with a smaller team instead of like a huge, you know, I worked for a huge company, big corporate company, so you know, that there were many, many people I never even saw, much less knew, at my corporate office. Okay, so now it is time for the end of the the lesson, and the end of my lessons always end in a critique. Here, I'm going to move this down so we can see really well. A critique is really important. So I want you to do this if you feel like sharing in chat the critique of your work, if you did follow along with me, or whatever it was that you worked on, like however far along you are right now, if you were doing something different. I want to hear what your feedback is on your own work, and we can talk about that. But for me, I'll go ahead and do mine. So I always have my students say one thing that they think is working really well in the drawing, and then one thing that they feel like they could work on to improve the drawing. So the first thing, I'm going to talk about the fir tree. So one of the things that I think is doing really well is I really like the soft brush strokes in here. I mean, it was pencil strokes, I guess, not brush strokes. But I like the, it does look like a fir tree to me. I mean, you know, I like that so I think that's working really well. I think by softening it with the spreader or with your finger, if you're doing that, I think that was very effective. What I don't think is as effective is up here, I have some areas where they're connecting or they're right at the same place. And I think it looks too even. It doesn't look natural because it looks too precise, you know. I know I just wiped that off with my hand, which when I told you guys earlier to always blow eraser bits away so that you don't smear things, but it was not, that area wasn't important. So I also like my grass. I think that the grass, the shadow down here is doing a good job. But the biggest thing for me is I probably could have had a few more holes, you know, sky holes. And I think that these are too even. So maybe in my next go round when I draw a fir tree, I will try to be more conscientious about having these come in different places and not be quite so even going all the way up. I did better down here. It was just up at the top. All right, so for the deciduous tree, this was elm tree. First of all, the very, very first thing is my elm tree is not as fat as I would like it to be. I would really like the crown at the top to be thinner than at the bottom. That is easily remedied by when I start out, I maybe start drawing it a little smaller, so that way my proportions can spread out a little bit more. I know I mentioned the thing that I don't think is working first. So the thing that I think is working really well is it does have a very soft appearance. Again, the spreader is kind of the miracle to this, but I really like the shadows in here. I think the shadows are very effective in making it look 3D and realistic. I also think that it was very effective. The holes that I thought I didn't do enough of, but now I'm thinking I did just the right amount, because I think the sky holes are very effective. So I'm trying to move this a little bit more so it's completely in the camera, since my camera keeps moving on me. The one I'm getting tomorrow is a really, really nice camera, so hopefully that will be resolved. You can actually see smudge marks on my paper where my finger has touched it. So you can always come here with like an eraser, but you don't have to. The thing is that in fiber arts, when you're working with fabric, you want there to be tiny little mistakes here and there, because we call that evidence of the hand, and it makes your work look more like artwork and not like a copy of something, you know. It makes it if something is perfect, I mean, it sounds nice, but then it looks like it was made by a machine. So the fact that, there are smudge marks and stuff on here is actually very amenable to doing art. Okay, now the last thing, and this is actually kind of important, always sign drawings in pencil. Even if your drawing has like some watercolor or somewhere in it, it is tradition to sign in pencil. I like to sign in the bottom right hand corner. My artist signature is S. Goski, which is why you'll see that like on my Instagram as S. Goski. So I practice my artist signature many, many, many times. You know how you see like in the movies, you'll see like a little girl will write her name with the boy she likes last name, and she'll write it over and over and over again. Well, I did that, but with my artist signature. I tried out a bunch of different artist signatures to see what I wanted it to look like, and then once I found one, I just kept writing it over and over until it's become basically the same way. And the people at the bank hate it because it's not my full name, but that's what they get. So anyway, does anybody have any questions, or does anyone want to share what their want to share, like, with the drawing that they did, if they worked on one, what their feedback for themselves would be? While you do that, I might try to get my camera working so that you can see me. So let me know. Let me know if you have any feedback, guys. Feedback for me or feedback on yourself. I'm about to move the camera. I've got to cut the duct tape off because hopefully. And I will just hold this. Could you write your website address? I have trouble finding it. Oh, sure. I actually have it on when I'm on my offline page, but I'll type it in here too. And let's see, my Instagram. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I'll hold my drawing so you can still see it, but then you can see my lovely visage. So did anybody actually follow along? Man, this is very lopsided. Or did everybody just kind of watch today? I guess everybody just kind of watched today, which is cool. I appreciate that because you can go back and watch the stream, and I don't know how lagging is in VOD. I'm sure it's exactly the same, but the lagging, I guess, is something to deal with in today's stream. But if you go back and watch this, then you can do these trees from the beginning.